Hi everybody. There's been some good Beatles authors over the years. There's been some very good Beatles authors over the years. But there's one man trying to make a name for himself as the greatest of them all. Mark Lewisohn. This is his tune-in extended edition, and 6 years after buying it, I've just finished reading it and I'm going to talk about it now. If you've read this book, let me know which version, let me know what you thought of it, or even tell me what your other favourite Beatles books are. I would love to hear from you. So why did it take 6 years? Well, I'll come on to that. But let's talk about Mark Lewisohn first of all. So he's the man who spent a long time as an insider in the Beatles camp. He worked on things like the Anthology Project, Beatles Live at the BBC, and lots of Beatles related projects in the 1990s. And he had access to really the sort of inner vaults at Abbey Road, and he listened to all the recording sessions. So he already had a sort of a great head start on a lot of authors. And in 1988, he published this Beatles recording sessions, which was a fantastic resource at the time, with details of every session that they did. He expanded on that in 1992 with the Beatles Chronicles, which wasn't just recording sessions, it was literally their entire lives, what they were doing from the day they became the Beatles to the day that the Beatles split up. And this has been absolutely fantastic research for the tune-in books that are following. But they really just scratch the surface. This book here, so this book came out in 2013 and I bought it in 2014, and the reason why it's taken me 6 years is that for a long time I think I was just daunted by it and I didn't dare go near it because of just how huge it is. But seriously, if you're going to get this book, just don't be put off by that at all. It will capture you, it will bring you into its world. There's two versions of this book. This is the expanded edition. There is a cut down version which still is over 900 pages long. Now my understanding, I've not read that version, but my understanding of the difference between the two is that where this goes into lots of information about not just the Beatles themselves, but the world around them and what was influencing them and what kind of things were happening in the world. The shorter edition focuses more just on the Beatles themselves. So there's some great revelations in here, some of which I'll talk about, some of which I'm not going to spoil. But that shorter version just still goes into the same level of Beatle depth as this. Now, I'm going to put links down below for both these books. This is not a cheap book. This may be one of the most expensive books you'll ever buy, but it is absolutely worth it. The shorter edition is an absolute steal at the price. Really, for 900 pages of what Mark Lewisohn gives you. It's incredible. So the thing with Mark is that, purely my opinion here, that he's interested in two things. He's interested in telling a great story, and he's interested in the truth. If it's a great story but it's not true, he's not going to tell it. Mark is wanting to be the historian for the future. You know, in 200-300 years' time, when people look back on what the Beatles were and what they did to the world, his will be the story that is told and is researched and learned. I'm just going to open this book up now, so I'm just going to show you sort of briefly what's in here and talk a little bit more about what's in it. So this book, this is volume 1, although it's actually 2 books in this extended edition. There's about 1,500 pages here before you get to hundreds of pages of footnotes and indexes, which in themselves are fascinating. But there's about 1,500 pages here, and it just goes up to the end of 1962. It goes no further. So the level of detail is incredible in here. I think it's about 90 pages in even before John's born. And at around about page 300, little Richie sees a drum kit in a window that he's interested in buying. So if you want the backstory of who these people were and how they became what they were, you are not going to get anything close to this in terms of research. There's some great parts. I mean, Mark writes excitingly. He writes from the heart, but like I say, overall, he wants the truth. There's no level of research he won't go to in order to uncover the truth. It's a little bit like a scientist, I think, where, you know, scientists like being proven wrong because it means they've furthered their understanding. And I think that's the same with Mark. I get the impression that he almost likes if he finds that something that he discovered 20 years ago is actually wrong and gets new information, because it means that he can learn more. He's not just going to peddle the usual stories here. It's interesting reading the credits at the end of the book about who Mark was able to speak to in his research for the books. So, of course, unfortunately, when you're dealing with a story that's from, a lot of it's from 50, 60, 70 years ago, there's a lot of people no longer with us. But Mark spoke to so many people who were in the cavern in Liverpool following the Beatles in their early days and who knew them really well. He got to have a chance to have interviews with Neil Aspinall, lifelong friend, managing director of Apple, before, of course, unfortunately, Neil passed away earlier than expected. And he says he even had some answers to emails from Paul McCartney, who answered some very specific questions that he needed answering. So he's able to go right to the heart of the Beatles story here with his research, which again sort of sets him on a level above nearly any other Beatles author, I think. I was lucky enough to meet Mark a couple of years ago, and I had these with me, and I got him to sign the first one to Andrew. All the best, Mark Lewisohn. And he said to me, I might as well sign the other one while I'm here. So I said, brilliant. I wasn't going to pester you for two, but if you want to. And we'd been talking about just the fact that, if he wasn't going to do these books, nobody was really. So that's why he put, it needed doing, right? So I'm really pleased that I've got these signed. Like I say, the level of detail is fantastic. I sort of dipped in and out of this book until about July, and with lockdown and having more time on my hands than normal, from about July onwards is when I hit the 6th of July 1957, the day when John met Paul. And I've just been absolutely sort of hammering this book ever since, and just finished it in the last few days. There's some funny parts in it as well where, Mark uses some artistic license when he's talking about John's marriage to Cynthia in 1962. He talks about Aunt Mimi's reaction. Imagine, no possessions. And while that's clearly artistic license, it's also the kind of thing you could just imagine Aunt Mimi saying with John marrying Cynthia. And also even right at the end where it says, end of part 1, intermission. Well, that's exactly what you see in Help, isn't it?
End of part 1. Intermission.
So these books cover really everything up to the end of 1962. There's those really early days of John, Paul and George when they were known by the name of J Page 3. There's so much information here about the visits to Hamburg, the Pete Best story, and the detail around how he came to be replaced by Ringo. That's gone into so much depth in here, including why and how Brian Epstein tried to cover himself for any legal action by Pete afterwards. Fantastic depth. The story in here about George Martin and how he came to sign the Beatles, that was the big sort of headline grabbing thing when this book came out. And whilst I don't want to spoil the story for if you're going to read this, when I did read it, and knowing that it's true, because knowing that Mark would not put it in here if it wasn't true and he hadn't researched it to such a degree, I literally had to put the book down and finish for the night and just take in what I'd just read, because I didn't want to have it sort of lost in the midst of then reading another 20 pages afterwards. It's an incredible story about how George Martin really didn't want to sign the Beatles, and the position that he was put in forced it into to sign them. It's incredible. There's people's stories in here who I certainly didn't know about. There's a guy called Kim Bennett, and his story is absolutely fascinating. I'm probably going to do another video about that at some point where I go into more detail about what a pivotal role he played in the Beatles' success in the early days, because he was fighting for them as much as they were fighting for themselves, and as much as Brian Epstein was fighting for them. When the rest of the world did not want to know, there's a guy called Kim Bennett who was really, really plugging away. And I was also surprised by, there's a particular song that that was absolutely instrumental in the Beatles becoming famous and getting their initial success. And it's an unlikely song. It was Like Dreamers Do. Now, I wasn't aware of the importance of that song, but the EMI signing the Beatles was all down to the fact that they wanted to get the publishing rights for Like Dreamers Do. And that was the whole reason why EMI wanted the Beatles, was for the publishing rights for that song. I didn't know anything about that, and there's so much detail about that in here. So, whilst there are some not very good Beatles books around on the market, there's some very good ones. This, as I said earlier, these are going to be the ones that are going to be remembered in hundreds of years' time. These are going to be the reference books. Imagine if hundreds of years ago that there'd been people who had been able to go into this much depth writing down about the lives of Mozart, Beethoven, William Shakespeare, for example. They would have been such immense resources today, and that's what these are going to be in the future. On the day when I got these signed by Mark, I asked him about Volume 2, because there's going to be Volume 2 and Volume 3, which are going to cover right up to the end of the Beatles. And Mark's thoughts a couple of years ago was that it was still probably 3, 4, 5 years away from Volume 2 coming out, which I guess is probably going to go to a mid-period Beatles, maybe sort of around 1966, something like that. We could be 10, 15 years away from a Volume 3, I don't know, but I think we need to protect Mark. I really hope that Mark is kept safe and well and bubble-wrapped, because future generations need him. This generation needs him, because we need that full storytelling to the depth that it has been told in here. So I cannot recommend these books enough. If you are a Beatles fan, you need to read these books, basically, because you only know part of the story if you've not read those. It's incredible how much I've learned from that, and I'm really excited for Volume 2, so I hope Mark has been productive during lockdown. I imagine he's been busy beavering away, hopefully writing this year in 2020, so that we can start getting nearer to that Volume 2. But I don't suppose Mark Lewisohn will ever see this, but if you do, thank you, Mark, for these fantastic books, which I can't recommend enough. And that is my views on TuneIn. If you've enjoyed that, please subscribe to my channel for seeing my future videos. Do loads of Beatles related stuff, and thank you very much for watching. I will see you again soon. Bye bye.